My guest today is Luka Symons. Luka is a certified holistic nutritional consultant and an instructor on staff at the Light Cellar in Calgary, Alberta. Through her uplifting and informative workshops, yes, talks, and one-on-one consults, Luka is here to help you make your kitchen your number one ally in maintaining robust health.
Yeah.
Her work focuses on helping get at the root of chronic health concerns and is steeped in the power of good food and real food choices while keeping it practical. Her approach is through the lens of traditional foods with a dose of good fun.
Totally.
Hi,
Always.
Luka.
Merci, merci. Thank you for having me, Caroline. This is so great to be here.
Oh, thank you for jumping in, accepting my invitation. As you know, but the listeners don't know, I met you virtually through my herbalism course, and you're teaching this amazing food as medicine masterclass. And I was listening to the first one while vacuuming the house, and I would often stop and burst out laughing. I almost peed in my pants once because you're so
I'm not sorry.
animated. And I was like, man, she's such a good teacher because I could actually remember things that I would normally not have remembered just because of the examples you gave. And so that's how I met you. And then we met for our first chat, virtual chat. And I feel like I met a soul sister who's really on a similar mission to bring knowledge about food as medicine. So thank you so much for coming here and sharing some of that wisdom.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. I could talk about food till the cows come home, and then I'll keep talking about it. Yeah. I really think food, like, I mean, I know we'll get into some of the science of it, but like, yeah, food is going to nourish your cells, and food is good for making sure that you can move through whatever chronic disease or diagnosis or not feeling great kind of pieces you've got to the puzzle. But more than that, like, food is just a way to bring people together. You know, if you think about it, like in history, when there's a funeral, when there's a birth, when a friend is sick or convalescing, you bring food. Food brings people together. Celebrations center around food. A cultural identity is centered around food. How does food not become this line of wisdom from the 8, 10, 20 generations before you that you carry forth? Food is an emotional thing. Food is a nourishing thing, but food is a joyful thing that brings people together, or not if you really super did not turn out the soup the way you wanted to.
So I want to talk about actually how to make food fun when you're on a low histamine diet. But before we talk about this, because there's some restrictions involved, which I should know because I'm doing right now a biphasic diet, so it's both SIBO and any tips you have. I shared that on Instagram yesterday and didn't get a lot of tips from people. And I'm like, I don't think people know about histamine, which is why it's such a good thing that you're here. I don't think people know a lot about SIBO. But again, your expertise became histamine, and I want to talk about that. I mean, so much to cover, especially how it relates to skin, because there's a huge correlation between, again, histamine and SIBO and just gut issues in skin. And the lack of response from my community on Instagram, I think that this is probably that missing link that they don't know about that we need to talk about.
Absolutely, 1,000,000%. So histamine is this thing that, like, I've figured it out. It's taken me a long time to get to. And it turns out I have histamine issues myself. Histamine intolerance, I suppose, is how you could qualify it. But histamine has this potential of impacting every single cell of the body. There's a histamine receptor on every cell of the body, which means histamine, which your body produces, you make, it comes in through food, bacteria makes it. Some of the bacteria in your gut will make it. I love that teacup. But histamine is, you need it, you make it, you use it. It's a natural part of the diet, the food you're eating. There's some foods that are higher in histamine, some that are lower, but histamine is a natural part of being human. You need it. You need it for, you need it for digestion. You need it to actually make hydrochloric acid. You need histamine in the smooth muscle stuff where it pushes things down. So think of, your digestive tract as you're pushing digested food down the tract. Your in your urinary tract to push the urine down to exit. You'll need it actually for the good times for both men and women when they're dancing, if you know what I mean, euphemistically. Like having good times with yourself or with a partner. There's actually histamine involved in the pleasure response. Like the histamine is just has a really big role to play in being human. We make it, we need it, you use it, but you're supposed to clear it once you've used it. And the
Ah,
problem when histamine is a problem is typically because you cannot clear it very well, or you're making too much. And then it becomes a little bit of a puzzle piece and trying to figure out and go at the root and digging deep really to find out what's at the root for you. So when there's a histamine issue, it's really different from one person to the next. So that's the first piece I really want people to understand, is that if you follow a low histamine plan that someone's got set out, it might work for you, but it might not, because that plan will work for a certain subset of people who have a certain constellation of things going on, but it won't work for others. And so it really begs the question, what's at the root and how different is it from one person to the next? So that's the first piece. The second piece, as I was saying, every single cell in your body has the ability to receive a histamine. So it's got a receptor site. Just means it's kind of like a landing pad. So if you think of like a little landing pad on every cell in the body, histamine, when your body produces it, and I can talk about why your body's making it, comes and lands in this receptor site. And as it lands in the receptor site, then it turns some certain things on. That's the biochemistry of histamine. It turns whatever function that cell is supposed to be making when it has the histamine receptor land go, okay, it's time to get to work, guys. And the cell does something and makes something or has a process to go through. So this is why it's such a complicated thing. Histamine has the potential of impacting every single organ and cell in the body.
wow.
So for some people, histamine can show up as a skin thing, which I'm sure we'll dive into. For others, it can show up as a hormonal piece. For others, it can show up as a digestive piece. It can be migraines for some with the nervous system. It can be in the lungs. There's a really big part of histamine that has a part to play in asthma, for example. So people who have, there's a diagnosis called interstitial cystitis, which has to do with peeing and the whole organ of pee, like everything tied into pee. So if you have an urge to pee a lot, that sometimes can be an indicator that there's a histamine issue. Like
Wow.
it has the potential of impacting every function of the body. So that's why when we're talking about histamine stuff, you start to dive into it and you go, holy Toledo, histamine is all of the things. And kind of, yeah, you're not wrong, right? So what do? I think you just go back to bed and you say, that's enough. Thanks, bye. I wish, but that's not
Yeah.
as simple as it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So as always, when we learn something new, often it can be a little overwhelming. And as you know, I'm running a rosacea healing program right now. And I remind people all the time, because towards the end of the program, we're going to talk a little bit about histamine, because if they haven't made progress with their rosacea, next step is probably histamine or SIBO, but one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And I had to remind myself that yesterday. I had a little bit of a flip out and I was like, oh my God, I've been preparing for my biphasic diet for almost 3 weeks. So I've been really organized with this time because I want to be invested. And yeah, the first time we're introduced an idea that seems overwhelmed, the brain can kind of, say, well, for me, it would be like, just let's grab a Netflix and a glass of wine. Just
Yeah.
for you, it was let's go to bed. But anybody listening, just keep an open mind and know that the more you start to dive into this, and that's what I like about you, actually, like you shared last time we spoke that you had issues with your daughter. And I watched one of your videos on your website for your food reset program, and you're sharing that story of, you're a really good mother and you cook from scratch and you have a garden and you do everything, you're doing everything quote unquote right. And then your kids started to have a lot of cavities and then you went to the dentist. It's like shit, like 6 cavities. And then 6 months later, 12 cavities. And then you decide, because you're empowered, you're an empowered goddess, and you went down the rabbit hole to say, okay, what the fuck is happening with this? And you became a holistic nutritionist. and here you are. And that's my favorite kind of empowerment stories. And I keep saying that on the podcast. I want people to take the healing process into their own hands.
Mhm.
So you can be overwhelmed at first because it's like, oh my God, like one more thing. Well, it's
Yeah.
one more thing that's going to change your life for the best. And if you can shift your mindset with that, you might very well start to see shifts in your skin and in your body. Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't always show up right at the beginning. So the payoff is much, much further down the line.
Ooh.
But in taking those steps, I really truly believe, like, we're, you know, it's 2021 when we're recording this. So
Yeah.
to me, I think we're living in a time where there's this invitation to change how we're doing things. I don't think the way that the world is running right now is actually sustainable for the environment, sustainable for people, never mind, sustainable for relationships, and sustainable in the long term on so many levels. So when these health struggles, if you will, show up, suckalicious. First of all, wouldn't it be so nice if we could all just go on the beach and just hang out all the time? That would be great. And
Yeah.
we can't.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, let that go when you can, when you're ready to let it go. Don't let it go yet if it's hanging on to for something, if it's
Yeah.
like a life buoy for you. But doing like these are, I hate to say it sounds so trite, but it's an invitation. It's an invitation to change some things. And the deal, especially what I think is really important, is it's an invitation to listen to yourself. You know, when you have skin stuff, when you have histamine stuff, when histamine is showing up, it's your body talking to you. So it's not your body against you. Your body will never be against you. Your body will always work with you with the sole idea that she's going to do what she can for you to survive this moment right now.
Yeah.
Always, 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 always. So when there's stuff showing up, if you have skin troubles that could be related to histamine, if you have digestive issues or migraines, if right, you know, the week before your period, a whole bunch of histamine stuff shows up, yeah, totally related to estrogen, and an overabundance of estrogen for whatever reason can be one of 18 different things. But when these signs show up, when these manifestations show up in the body, it's your body going, oh, hey, I have a little love note to send to you. I need some help. And that's what's going on. So you have to start to, like, it's a love letter from your body.
Ooh.
Pain is huge. I know it can also rattle your root base of what you think you are or what you have become and how you identify for yourself. But when the body talks, she'll start whispering, and the louder she gets, or the longer you wait, or the longer you're able to read those signs, the louder she'll get, because she wants your attention, because she wants you to know something's up and something's not working, and she needs you to pay attention. So
Yeah.
I think when histamine shows up, it's really, in my experience, because I work a lot with histamine clients who struggle with histamine stuff. Every one of my clients with histamine stuff are people who want to get better. Like, it's the body wanting to get better. When histamine shows up, it's really make it clear. It's
Yeah.
the body that is speaking loudly to say, let's fix this.
I'm just curious, like in your experience, if you could explain, and we're going to really put it in the context, let's say of rosacea specifically, give us a picture of what is happening in the body that histamine could play a role in the manifestation of rosacea. Give us a picture what's happening in the body.
Manifestation is the perfect word for it. That's exactly what it is. It's a
Yeah.
manifestation of
Yeah.
histamine. So, and this will be true for sure for rosacea, and it'll be true for anything where histamine is an issue.
Okay.
But I'll get to some of the specifics with rosacea in a second. But so when histamine is an issue, it's typically because you can't clear spent histamines very well, or there's an abundance of histamine being produced. So I want to backtrack a little bit. Histamine is essentially, well, it comes in through food, but your body makes it. Your immune system also makes it because it's part of your immune system's reaction when there's some type of inflammation. And inflammation is the body's stress response to fix something. You know, if you get knifed by a cougar, you go for a walk. I'm in the foothills here in Alberta, 3 to 7 territory. Cougar knifes me. Oh my God, right? It's going to raise up and it's going to welt and it's going to get red and swell, be hot, hot, hot to the touch. So everything, so much of this type of reaction in that moment is actually led by histamine. Histamine is released by your immune system. It's your mast cells and your basophils that are part of your immune system that are releasing these histamine granules. So they're tiny, they're almost like, it's like a capsule of a bunch of little granules. And in that inflammatory reaction, your immune system says, release the hounds. And it opens these mast cells and you get this puff of histamine that comes out. Histamine's job in the scenario of this cougar is to open and make porous your blood vessels in order to pour out your blood. Well, that sounds gross, but your blood is your immune system. Your immune system is coursing around in your blood. So this vasodilation or it makes leaky blood vessels. Essentially, that's what histamine does. Leaky blood vessels, so that blood supply that's carrying your immune system is leaking out into the area in order to clean up, in order to stop an infection, in order to help swell the tissue so that you can close up shop as quickly as possible before you can knit it back together. There's a bunch of immune system reaction in that blood supply as well, but histamine is a part of that. So histamine plays a role in that immune reaction of any type of inflammation, whether it's an acute one like a saber-toothed tiger or a cougar, or if it's something like your body is super stressed. Yeah. So releasing histamine is part of your body's stress reaction.
I'm just thinking, I'm showing my cheeks because everything you described is a description of what rosacea looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. Histamine is there to help make porous the area because it's allowing your immune system response to come out and to do the job of cleanup and to help protect you. Your immune system is your number one defense, right? And the histamine release is part of that defense system. So when histamine is an issue, it can be one of 4 different things that we know of so far. So histamine, I want to first start with the scenario of the sinks. We talk about this on our blog at Histamine Haven. So, I want you to think if you have a sink. So is your tap on all the time? Can you turn off the tap? And is the plug at the bottom working? Can you unplug it? And is it clear enough to clear all of the water coming in? So the tap at the top is the histamine coming into your system. So is your tap always locked on with a steady pour of water coming in? That can be a problem. Is the plug at the bottom working? Can you clear the sink? Now, histamine are only a problem. They'll manifest as a sign, outward sign where you can see it when your sink is full and overflowing. So when you have that rosacea, it's because your sink is overflowing and the histamine is in excess.
Mm-hmm.
When you get migraines, that's your sink overflowing. So the work becomes trying to figure out why your tap is on all the time, trying to figure out how to close that tap to reduce the amount of water coming in and improve the plug at the bottom so you can clear that extra water to give you that wiggle room. So that if God forbid you eat a super high histamine food, for example, the tap gets turned on full blast, but the sink was empty, so you can handle it and it drains and you turn the tap off after you ate the high histamine food. So now the histamine, your sink never overflows at that stage. So you eventually want to get to the stage where, we're working on a book right now, so we're calling it the hi-ho principle. Histamines in equals histamines out. And that's the piece you want to get to. So you have to start to understand, okay, what's contributing to histamines in and what's contributing to histamines out? And how can we balance this out so that the histamines in are equaling the histamines out? And it's different for each person. So histamines in can come from the foods you eat. Yeah, there's some foods that are higher in histamine. And funny enough here, avocado, fermented foods, bone broth. These are like spinach, tomato. These are
Wine, chocolate. Let's name them all for people. Wine, chocolate.
All of them. Oof. Citrus, tomato, spinach, avocado, fermented foods, bacon, salami, all fermented foods like salamis and those types of
Food.
processed.
Yeah. Old age.
Yeah, aged foods.
Aged
So anything, yeah, the further something is from being alive, the higher the incidence of producing histamine as just naturally occurring in the food itself. So dried prunes versus fresh prunes, dried prunes will be quite high histamine, fresh prunes will not. So canned foods, fish actually tends to develop a lot of histamine the further it is from being alive. And meat, you know, beef is hung for 26, 28 days before it's processed. Well, in that 26 to 28 days, there's a lot of processes happening in the meat that make it easier for us to digest, and we can cut through the steak. A freshly slaughtered steak from a cow, can't even cut through it. So tough. So that's why they need to let it hang. But in that hanging time, you now have the potential of developing histamine, because part of what happens is histamine is also produced by bacteria. Not a bad thing necessarily, but if your sink is really full, now you can't take that extra histamine coming in that could potentially be developed by bacteria. So the more you work at helping improve the water coming in and clearing the water at the bottom, the better now you can handle a higher histamine food like fish that was left to defrost for a day in the fridge, as opposed to fish that's cooked from frozen. Or beef is higher in histamine than, say, pork. Or rabbit is lower in histamine than bison, like these kinds of scenarios. So it becomes a little bit of a educational piece to understand, where does histamine come in? It comes in through food. It is produced in the body when the body is in a stress mode. So if your body doesn't feel safe for whatever reason, you're going to produce more histamine. There's a potential for your body to produce more histamine. The hypothalamus triggers that, actually. There is also, once you've used histamine, you're supposed to be able to clear them. And there's two spots. One of them is at the gut level. The other one is at the liver. And they're two enzymes that your body naturally makes. First one's called Dao Diamine Oxidase, and that's at the gut level. If you have any type of gut thing going on or leaky gut, now you slow down the ability to make that enzyme. So that means any food you're eating that has higher histamine in it doesn't get broken down. So now you just turn that tap on full blast. Hate that. Suck it. No thanks. Although high histamine foods are also typically quite delicious. So it makes it really tricky. And eventually the deal is you should be able to do some repair work and do some support work so that you can bring in those higher histamine foods back in. But in early days, there's good evidence that a low histamine diet can help. Low histamine diet does not fix the issue, though. Because the issue is you can't make that enzyme, or you can't make HNMT. Oh gosh, I forget what it's called. Histamine N-transferal methyl transferase, methyltransferase. Doesn't matter what it is. HNMT, it's an enzyme that you make at the liver level. And that one's supposed to break down histamines that you produce in the body as a neurotransmitter, as a digestive aid, as a metabolic byproduct of just your body working. So you should be able to clear it in the liver. Well, how's that working? 40% of the population has some genetic mutation that makes it really tricky to make HNMT. So your production of it is quite drastically reduced. So it bears looking into, how's your liver doing? So far we talked about gut, can be a liver issue. If your body's in any stress mode, any type of stress mode, whether it's external stress, whether you've got autoimmune or chronic disease going on in the body that also adds to your stress, whether you feel the stress of the outside world keenly or you struggle with worries, anxiety, depression, mood stuff, relationship stress in your family, with colleagues at work, mortgage payments, like all of the stressors, right? All of this adds to your stress load. The higher your stress load or that burden of stress, the more your body doesn't feel safe and produces histamine. So we've talked gut, liver, adrenals, because they feel the stress keenly. So the more you're relying on your adrenals, the more you now have the potential of having histamine issues. And the fourth one is your immune system. If your like 70% of your immune system lives in your gut. If you have any type of gut stuff going on, your immune system has a hard time and is handling more than it should through that digestive tract. Now it's really overburdened by digestion not working well. So your immune system is now primed to feel stress. It is stressed itself. So it's going to be super primed and say, well, we're living in really dangerous territory. I'll get ready and make more histamine and I'll build more mast cell because I don't think you're safe. We got to be safe. So I'm going to protect you. So when the body is making extra histamine, it's because your body is working at protecting you because she perceives on some level you're not living in a safe environment. So histamine is trying to protect you. What? Holy Toledo, your body loves you. Of course she does. Of course she does. So when there's a histamine issue, it's either gut, liver, adrenals, or immune system, or any combination of 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those things.
Right.
Oh, is it nap time yet? Like, yeah.
Is it time for a glass of wine, you mean?
No, it's high histamine it also super interferes with the liver piece. So and enjoy it and let it bring you joy. But if it trips a histamine response, you should call me.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a very good explanation. My goodness. I want to rewind and go back. I had a million questions, but wait, what do I want to ask now? Where do you want to where do you want
Okay,
to
so,
go, Luka?
okay, well, let me tell you. Okay, so
Whoops.
like, so just to make it, I just really want to make the point clear. It's not histamine that's the issue.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you're having a hard time clearing it, right?
Or that
So
the tap is too much open?
yeah, the tap is too much open. The plug at the bottom isn't working and your sink is overflowing. So first, a low histamine diet is great for helping to turn off the tap, but a low histamine diet doesn't fix it.
No.
You really, it bears repeating that you have to figure out what's the root piece. Which of the four do you have?
Yeah.
And how can you help support those? It's interesting to me how much adrenals play into it. So if there's a really high burden of stress in the body, for whatever reason, external stress, emotional stress, or biochemical things not working well in the body, all of that adds up to the adrenals feeling like you're in a stress mode all the time. That really primes your body to produce more histamine. So a big part of it is to reduce the overwhelm and start with one piece. So in the case of rosacea, often it's a histamine reaction in the skin, because there's an excess of histamine. It can also be a mast cell activation syndrome, PS, which is a whole other kit and caboodle, but it does involve histamine in it as well. So that's what we're hoping to cover in our book. My colleague is a really big specialist on mast cell stuff, and then I'm bringing in the histamine piece. So when rosacea is showing up, you've got it's typically tied into a lot of histamine being released by the body. So first things first, your first step, a really good first step, is eat real food. Like, that sounds really simplistic and like, oh, well, whatever, I already eat real food. Most people who are coming at this and get to the depth of histamine stuff are already eating real food. But I'll tell you, the stuff that really super can trigger some of this are carrageenan, guar gum, acacia gum, locust bean gum, preservatives, color additives, the fake food-like stuff they put in processed foods. That tends to trip a lot of this response. So does genetically modified foods, interestingly enough. So one of the first things you could do is to simplify how you're eating and eat real food. So for example, a delicious chicken breast with 2 vegetables on the side for dinner. Brussels sprouts and carrots. Okay, good work. We're done. There's dinner. Like, we're not talking celery root gratin with a reduced béarnaise sauce with médaillon de porc. Like, it's nothing
Okay.
complicated.
We're not doing that because we're not doing dairy.
Yeah, well, dairy can trip, but dairy can also help in the long run if there's a histamine issue. Because of the DAO enzyme, there's stuff in dairy that can actually provide in balance nutrients, some of the things you need to make that DAO enzyme work, and some of the other pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't demonize any category of food. I don't want to demonize anything. If anything, I want to demonize fake food. Maybe.
Yeah.
And even there, that helps us get through the day sometimes. So bless it and get on with it when that has to happen. Like, whatever. Like, you're a human being. I'm going to really drop a huge bombshell and tell you nobody gets out alive. So it's okay. Don't worry about it. Bless it and get on with it, because that stress adds so much more. So do what you can to reduce stress.
Yeah.
Eat as simply as you can. That's one of the tricks. And balancing your meals and really eating a square, at least 3 meals a day, if not with snacks in between, can be one of the biochemical markers that we send to the body that you're not living in a time of famine. You don't have to stress. Let's bring down the stress. A lot of people who do sometimes intermittent fasting can be indicated, if you've got the right practitioner and they can track you and make sure that everything is working, can be okay, but it can worsen things for histamine people. So that's a tricky thing, right? There's these sort of, I suppose they're fads. I'm going to propose that we just eat. Why don't you just eat food? The other tip too, to start with, eat as fresh as possible. So eat as best you can from where it was grown. For example, here we're recording this in March, so early March. Well, March, I'm in Alberta and you're in Quebec. So there's no fresh tomatoes anywhere. unless they're greenhouse grown, and that's really just in the last 30 years. There was no one in the history around the world at this time of year who was eating fresh tomatoes unless you lived in Italy and they were fresh on the vine. Like really, there's nobody eating fresh tomatoes at this time of year. So maybe it's a time to not eat a bunch of tomatoes. Turns out tomatoes trip a whole bunch of histamine dumping anyway. So that's one of the foods that can be one of the biggest hitters.
Mhm.
So eating as fresh as you can, eating as seasonally as you can. Here we find ourselves at the end of winter. Well, typically you would have been relying on roots and shoots, things that would have been some of the new stuff coming up through the soil, like green onions and chives and parsley that might still be going around in the garden. But you would have been relying on some of the stores that came from the garden. In the summer, you'd be eating a lot of fresh food out fresh from the garden. In the fall, you're reaping the bounty and you're cooking with a lot of soups and stocks. In the wintertime, you're relying a lot, typically you would have, on animal foods, but you would have been cooking long, slow stews, stocks. Different parts of the world would have been making curries, and which is essentially just a super flavored stew. Like those are the types of things that you would have been eating. So trying to aim a more seasonal approach to the way that you eat can be one of those benefits. But eating fresh, sourcing your food as fresh as you can and eating locally can be a benefit. I know it's not a reality for a lot of people necessarily, depending where you are. But if you can source some local stuff, that will help. If you're able to bring down some of those high histamine foods, reduce what are those high histamine foods. So the big hitters, your vinegars, your fermented foods, bone broth, really, really high in histamine. Meat stock is not. And meat stock is way less stressful to make, takes way less time. And I have a recipe when you sign up for my newsletter. So you don't even have to go looking for it. And I can send you a link. I've got a blog post on it too. So I'll send you it so you've got it.
Yeah.
But a short cooked meat stock is really low in histamine. So it's a nice alternative to the big bone broth that everybody's pushing. Well, bone broth, super high histamine. If you have any gut issues 20 minutes after you have a bowl of bone broth, you are visiting the toilet wondering how quickly you can drop off all of the organs in your insides. Like it's terrible. It's a really nice way to know if you have gut issues, I suppose.
But that's confusing, Luka, because a lot of people are told to take bone broth for gut issues.
Because it's 2021, everyone's an expert, right? First of all. Oh, and understandably so, because you're trying to do research, you're trying to figure these pieces out. Here's the difference between meat stock and bone broth. Meat stock is a short cook. Bone broth is a long cook. Meat stock is predominantly meat on bones. Bone broth is predominantly bones.
Right. Okay.
For example, if you're doing a chicken, a full chicken in a meat stock, maybe 90 minutes simmering on the stovetop. If you're doing a bone broth of chicken, you're going 24, 48, or 72 hours of simmering on the stovetop. At the end, you ditch everything that's in the pot of a bone broth and you just drink the bone broth. In a meat stock, you're shredding all of the meat off the chicken and you can still consume the chicken meat, and you've got all of the juice that you've collected, essentially the meat stock. Meat stock does the repair. Bone broth does the maintenance. So you need to start figuring out, okay, do I want to do repair or do I want to do maintenance to my gut? If you're at the beginning stages of histamine stuff, you don't want to maintain what's happening at the gut. You want to do the repair.
Yeah.
So that's where meat stock comes in. The meat in the first inch next to the bones is where that medicine is. That's why you only need a short cooking time. The longer you cook, the more histamine develops. When they started, this is all information from the GAPS diet. So GAPS is the gut and psychology syndrome diet, which was a gut healing. I'm not allowed to use the word healing, whatever. But the gut healing protocol. And in the early days, they were talking about bone broth. So these kids who had seizures, they were like, great, this is all gut related. Let's fix their gut and give them bone broth. Well, these kids went from having a couple of seizures a day to having multiple seizures a day, consuming the bone broth. Oh, there's something in bone broth that if you have leaky gut might make things worse. There's a couple of things, but one of the things is histamine. Histamine's a neurotransmitter. You don't want to super add to the fire going on in the brain. So bring down the histamine content by cooking a shorter cooked broth and calling it meat stock instead. So meat stock is really just a full chicken covered in water, bring it to a simmer, put the timer 90 minutes, turn it off, shred the meat off the chicken and strain everything out. There's your meat stock. That's essentially what a meat stock is. So bringing in meat stock is going to, first of all, be a low histamine version of food. Second of all, it helps to do some gut mending. When you work at the gut mending, that's one of the pieces that could be behind histamine issues. So doing gut work is part of what you need to look at when you're bringing in a low histamine diet, because low histamine diet doesn't fix the clearance issue. We want to improve whatever the 4 pieces at the root of it can be so that you can handle histamine. Because that's the other thing. Some of those high histamine foods are incredibly nourishing. They're a problem if you're having histamine clearance. But avocado is amazing. Fermented foods are incredibly nourishing on a really deep level. So do the low histamine diet first to figure out, just to help turn off the tap of water coming in the sink.
Yeah.
Do some meat stock. When you start drinking meat stock on a regular basis, 1 to 2 cups a day is what I usually recommend for clients. You're starting to improve the plug at the bottom of the sink. So now you can clear the water, right? Yes, question.
Question.
Yeah, I have
Okay, many
awesome
questions.
things. Good.
Okay, I'm totally craving that. I'm going to be making that. Can I make like a beef? I'm craving, yeah, beef
Yeah,
stock.
yeah, you can. Beef will be higher in histamine than all the other meats. So,
Okay.
and skin on chicken is also high
Yes.
in histamine. So
Yeah.
you can do beef, but know that it will be higher in histamine. So in early
Okay.
stages, doing chicken's pretty good. Turkey's great. You can do rabbit. So I come from a long line of trappers. So rabbit would have been a traditional one to use. You can
Okay.
also do pork. You can do lamb for sure. Beef, lamb, bison, rabbit might take a longer cook. Poultry,
Okay.
shorter cook.
Got
But
it.
all of that, it's all, you get it when you sign up for my newsletter. It's all in the recipe.
Okay. And so remove the skin of the chicken. Yeah. So beef is on the allowed list for my biphasic diet.
Awesome. It's higher in histamine. That's funny. Huh.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that's cut out, so I don't know. I have I have a ton of practical questions for you on in terms of what we can and cannot eat. Okay, so wait, I raised my hand because I wanted to know. Okay, yes. So you cook it, it's 90 minutes, but in the low histamine, you're not supposed to have any leftovers.
Mhm.
So can I have my batch that I made today? Can I have it tomorrow?
You would typically in the early stages, you'd be freezing all of the different, you'd be freezing it in portions the day you made it. And then you pull it out and you heat it up from frozen. That's another tip to actually reducing the histamine. Histamine develops on a leftover. The longer it's out and away, freezing it slows down the histamine production.
Yeah.
In the fridge, it slows it down more than if it was on the counter, but not quite enough.
Yeah.
So in the early stages, freezing individual portions into the freezer will actually help to reduce your histamine count.
Okay, and then I pull it out and I put it on the stove and I drink it that way. Okay. On that same note, earlier you talked about cooking fish from frozen. So fish is not on my allowed list.
Because it's typically higher in histamine.
Just the thought of cooking a frozen fish, like I'm thinking, ugh, all the water is going to come out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you do that? That it's going to taste good? Because that goes against what anything my mama taught me.
So you can defrost it in a bath of water for 15, 20 minutes
Okay.
and then cook it from there. So,
Okay.
and then you'll dry it if you take some paper towels or even a
Yes.
clean dish towel, as long as you're not using any chemicals in your dryer sheets or whatever in.
I know we discovered that last week and I was like, what the
Yeah.
fuck is that smell from my Scott towel? And then Andrew goes online and he goes, a lot of people are complaining about this. I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah.
Oh,
So something to think about. Scott
yeah.
towel infused with what kind of toxic shit?
Oh, right. And so this is the thing. I think somebody's out to get us. And I think we're out to save us. So let's just save ourselves. Use a clean
Seriously.
cloth. Like
Yeah.
really just use a cotton cloth and you can wash it in your laundry, making sure that the chemicals you're using in your laundry are going to be okay because you can ingest anything that's in there, right? So
Yes.
you're using a cloth towel to dry your fish and then bake it from there. So you can easily quickly defrost a meat in a bath of cold water for 20 to 30 minutes. If it's a bigger cut, it could be a full hour. The one weird thing is that some meats don't, like the texture suffers if it's hanging out in cold water for a long time.
Right.
One of the other tips for lowering histamine and stuff is to actually get an Instant Pot and to use your
Okay.
Instant Pot to cook some of your foods. Instant Pot will, part of our book that we're trying to put together is a tip on how to cook meat from frozen in the Instant Pot, because it just reduces the histamine because you can cook shorter time. You can cook from frozen. You just need to add maybe 5 or 10 minutes, depending on the cut.
I did
And
not know.
yeah, and it's just a really great tool. Instant Pot and pressure cookers are a really great tip to helping reduce some of the histamine.
I'm looking forward to your book, and we're going to talk about this before we wrap up because I'm hearing so many amazing tips. I'm understanding more the role of histamine and how I can turn off the tap, how I need to heal the plug or heal the sink and open the plug. How do we open the plug? Did we cover that?
So that would be with doing some meat stock.
Okay.
If your liver is a part of the contributing pieces why you're having such an excess of histamines and you can't clear the extra one, then you need to do some deep nourishment to the liver. And that's where working with a practitioner can help. Adrenals, if you feel stress quite keenly, the stress, that burden of stress, I know we talked about this in the herbal class, but the burden of stress what it does, the higher the amount of stress that you're dealing with, it starts to shut down your thyroid, which is your main engine of the body. When the main engine is offline, you go to your backup generator, which is your adrenals. So now the amount of stress you're feeling adds so much to the production of histamine. So doing really deep nourishment to help support those adrenals and support bringing that thyroid back online is part of what can be, because I really think histamine can certainly be a metabolic issue. So really helping to heal some of that metabolic stuff can bring a relief and now can help to turn off the tap at the top, actually.
Okay.
And then the more gut work you can do, the more you start to take some of the pressure off of the immune system. In some cases, if there's mast cell activation as part of the picture, then that requires some really deep dive, maybe with a functional medicine doctor or a naturopath that can do some of the testing to really get to the root of what that piece might look like. And that at that point, you might be relying on some medications as well. And I mean, that is certainly out of my scope, but is a piece that can be of benefit. But yeah, when histamine's an issue, it's showing up, it's your body saying something's up. We need to rectify some of this.
So, what does it look like to nourish the liver?
Well, it depends on the person. So some people, dairy can help. For some, dairy can make it worse. For some, deep nourishment, it also has to do with the metabolic piece. So the more stress your body is under, the more you burn through carbohydrates, the more you burn through vitamin C, all of the B vitamins, and some other really important minerals like magnesium, copper, and vitamin A in animal form can be tricky. So deeply nourishing the liver looks like, that's the beauty of food, by the way. Food can help do some of that work that the liver does. The liver does like 400 plus jobs in the body. When you take on some of those jobs through food, and part of that is bringing in some animal foods, animal-based fats will have some of that animal version of vitamin A, for example. Well, there's two kinds of vitamin A. There's beta carotene that everybody knows. You eat carrots, you eat orange foods, right? Then there's the animal version, which is retinol. Well, when the body is well, your liver and your thyroid will take vitamin A, beta carotene, and turn it into the animal form of retinol. Anywhere the body is stressed and the liver's having a hard time, now you can't make that conversion. Guess what you need that vitamin for? You need it to make DAO enzyme, and you need it to knit the cells of the intestinal lining together. So if you can't make vitamin A because there's a metabolic issue, now you start to struggle with leaky gut. Now you start with an inability to not make that DAO enzyme to break down histamine coming in through food. So you just go to animal versions of that food to have the already converted form nourish you deeply. So that's one of the examples. There's also looking into some food grade B vitamin foods. Well, some of them are really high histamine, like nutritional yeast. So you have to take that off the table. But there's others that can calm mast cells. There's deep nutrition from organ meats that can be beneficial, but you can't start with that because they're higher in histamine. Like there's a method to the madness of thinking which pieces you need to put in place at which stage. But supporting the liver also looks like reducing the toxins in the outside. Improving your beauty care products because you absorb everything you put on your skin, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, liver demands nutritionally to help support balanced blood sugars. You can do it through food. The liver's supposed to be doing it. When the liver struggles, you have a hard time balancing blood sugars. Now you're tipping the adrenals to be in panic mode all the time. So it's kind of it's a metabolic piece at that stage. So
Okay, got it.
yeah, there's 18 trillion things, and it depends where you're at on the spectrum.
No, I just wanted you to clarify a little bit because most of the time people talk about supporting the detoxification process. And we certainly talk about that a lot on Journey to Glow and eliminating a lot of the toxic stuff that's in our food and in our environment and our beauty products. So we certainly cover that.
For sure, but part of it sometimes when there's a histamine issue is there's two pieces to detoxification. You bag the garbage and you take the garbage to the curb. Often when there's a histamine issue, you're pretty good at bagging the garbage, but you're having a super hard time taking the garbage to the curb. So part of doing that work is to dive deep and see, can you do phase 1 well? Can you do phase 2 well? Where do you need the support? And let's put some of that support in place. It can be due to a genetic thing. It can be due to a congestion issue. It can be due to intergenerational stuff. And who cares where it comes from? I mean, you can, I suppose, but also, oh, well, do you know what helps?
What?
Eating real food, which feels really super simplistic, but that's actually what it is at the end of the day. Eat as real food as you can, source as fresh as you can. Once you make a food, freeze it right away, especially in those beginning stages, and do the deep work to figure out, is it adrenals? Is it liver? Is it immune? Or is it gut? Or which combination?
One of the issues that I have, one of the symptoms that I have an issue with a little bit, and I know that it's supposed to be part of the detoxification process of the body, especially if someone has never done a cleanse, is that for some of the participants and myself in the past, my skin would just, you know, day 4, 5, 6, 7 of the cleanse, my skin starts to react. Or about 2 weeks also, people start reporting that their skin is getting worse before it gets better.
Mhm.
Now, I'm just wondering, based on what you told me, if that's a taking out the trash problem.
Mhm. It totally is. So when you do a detox, your liver's detoxifying all day, every day anyway.
Yes, we know.
When you're doing essentially a detox, you're helping rev up that function. So your liver that used to work 80 hours a week, you've just asked her to do 120 hours this week. So you're asking her to work harder, which is okay, right? But now she's revving through stuff a little bit faster. And if you eat a whole foods diet, part of even just switching to real food, if you've had a lot of packaged foods before, part of that switch can be a signal enough to the body of, oh, now we're changing how we eat and we're going to nourish deeply. So your body can also go, oh, I've been hanging on to this stuff for 20 years, move it out. And so now all of a sudden, you're not only dealing with the detoxification and the whatever the work that your body would have done for that days of stuff. But now it's having added load to it where it has to also deal with the 20 years of stuff that your body just decided to dump. So initially in those early stages, you do often see a flare up or a die-off reaction or Herxheimer, sometimes it's called. That it can be that. Sometimes I wonder too if it's taking the garbage to the curb issue, like you're saying. As you rev up detoxification, your main routes of elimination are typically going to the toilet. So solid and liquid, right? Hopefully two separate things, hopefully not in the same movement. But, going number 1 and number 2 to keep it PG, like whatevs. When those two routes of elimination, those are your two main routes. The third route is sweat. Fourth route, your backup route, is your skin. Oh, if you can't move stuff out, if you can't take it to the curb fast enough, regular routes and sweating, or if there's a lymph stagnation somewhere, you can't sweat it out. A lot of people have histamine issues, haven't sweat, or some of them, but half of my clients don't sweat. They're like, it's really quite nice. I don't need deodorant. I'm like, is it though? You should need a deodorant. You should be able to sweat some of this stuff out. You should have the ability to take that garbage to the curb. So you then have to do a little bit of digging to figure out, okay, so if I'm having a flare up, was I able to take the garbage to the curb? Have I just added more garbage? And now the body's like, I'm trying to get it out. And it shows up through the skin. So even like when I work with clients, we open up detox pathways first before we actually rev anything up in
Yeah.
order to ensure that you could take the garbage to the curb. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And we aim to do that also by focusing on gut healing first. So then my question, because I have to think about the question participants and listeners would have, that they would say, no, I'm going to the bathroom and I'm doing everything right and I'm drinking lots of water, but still. And something that happens with skin issues and particularly rosacea is that, and that's what I heard from a Chinese medicine practitioner, is that your weakness is your skin. So your weakness is a specific area on your face. And that's where the garbage might end up going because of that weakness for some reason. And I'm just trying to understand how that works more based on our conversation. Yeah, I'm trying to make sense of all the scenarios because my obsession is to create the strongest program and the strongest map that covers absolutely everything. I don't want to have anybody listening as a listener, a podcast, or someone in my group programs. And I'm thinking about a girlfriend right now who went. She has acne, and she did a 4 weeks program with a naturopathic doctor, and now she's almost 3 to 4 months into it, and her acne is not doing better. And for me, one of the things I want to break is the expectation of how long things should take. And because you invested in a program that's an 8-week program, let's say like ours, that things should happen within that time frame, because it might not. And I want to listen to those cases that are not doing better after 8 weeks or a certain period of time. Or I'd like to answer that, like, well, why is it that your skin reacts and how can we support that better? I just feel like I don't know if the bar is really high for me in terms of the solution I want to provide. So all of that is spinning in my head as I'm talking to you, with your way of explaining that connects more dots. It connects even more dots for me. So with everything I've said, which was a jumble of thoughts, does something come to your mind that you feel could illuminate us on our journey to glow?
That's a mic drop moment.
Yeah, big question.
Yeah. So, yeah, if histamine is a part of it, it's worth it to figure out which of the 4 pieces is behind it. The detox piece for sure, I think, is a big part of it too. One of the things that I look to support my clients is we look at homeopathics, actually. And I really love homeopathics because they kind of work on this, like I think of them as grandmother helpers, like they work on an energetic level without being physical in your face kind of thing. And it's just this gentle support of, oh, I'm going to open this doorway for you. Whoop, look, you can take the garbage to the curb now.
I
So
love you said that.
yeah, like homeopathics are just kind of that helper. And, we live in, well, we're recording this in 2021. So in and around this time, we are living in a time of abundance. We have an abundance. We have an abundance of possibilities, which can further confound the issue. So you start to do some research on rosacea, for example, there's 82 quadrillion different ways of looking at it. So how the piss are you supposed to make sense of all of that? Well, you go back to bed first, you make a cup of tea, and you go watch Netflix. And then you call Caroline because she's got some really good solutions. But this is why I think we're seeing a proliferation of this specialization where everybody's got a specialization of something because you've had to figure it out for yourself. And then you can become an advocate for yourself and empower others in having found some of those solutions, because we are in a time of abundance. We're in a time of abundance of possibilities. We're in a time of abundance where if you want a banana, you drive 20 minutes down the road to the grocery store and back, and you paid 19 cents and you got a banana. If my great grandmother would have wanted a banana, I don't even know if she would know what a banana is. Like, I don't know if she ever even ate a banana. In the late 1800s, would she have had a banana? I don't know. Would she even know?
Probably
So,
not.
right? And if she wanted a cup of tea, she'd go out in the backyard and pick things that were in the garden. Well, I just go down to the health food store and I go buy a pre-made mix that somebody made, and I make a delicious tea. And I think this is such a lovely ceremony for myself. I love this cup of tea. It's so nourishing. We are the first generation in a very long, like I think in the history of humanity, or maybe the second generation, that can rest. We are the first generation that has the capacity to nap. We are the first generation where there's so much that is done for us and available to us that we can rest. Therefore, I think we are the first generation where we have to deal with crap. Because I think the generations before us were too busy just making ends meet, getting through the day. So now we have the same amount of stress and more, I dare say, because I think the outside world and how we're dealing with the world is adding to our stress levels through chemicals, through EMFs, through 5G, through all of these things we can't measure yet. But more than that, we're more and more disconnected from the natural world.
Yeah.
So one of the key pieces I think we can do is to tap back into our ancestral knowledge and really just think. It's not, I'm not saying I didn't grow up in Thailand, therefore I can never eat Thai food. That's not what I mean. But I mean, like, okay, I'm Irish, French, Canadian. A lot of my people, like Maritimers, les Acadiens, Ahway Meza. So we would have eaten, both Irish and the Acadians would have eaten tons and tons of seafood because that was free and that was what you caught. That was how you nourish yourself. Well, it so happens that in my lineage, we also have a lot of heart disease lately, not before, but lately. Well, do you know what helps to prevent heart disease is those fish oils. Oh, I'm in landlocked Alberta where I'm not eating fish 5 or 6 days a week and shellfish. So I find myself with a very different diet than 4 generations ago would have had. Well, that diet fed generations and generations and generations and didn't shift that much over those generations. And here we find ourselves with such a massive shift from how our ancestors ate. If I want kale, I can buy kale 12 months of the year. Did any of my grandmothers eat kale? If they did for 2-3 months, maybe in the summer, and that's it. So it's one of these figuring out, simplifying, taking away all of the complications that are out there that you can look for and find, and bringing stuff back in and keeping it simpler and decluttering your mental health space, decluttering your approach, and just one step in front of the other, and bless it and get on with it when it's too much.
So the argument would be, however, that we're not our ancestors anymore and we live in very different times and our soil is depleted. And now we have to have supplements to, support our system. We're just lacking in so many ways. So that's a whole other conversation. Yeah, but I hear that about going back to our roots and to local and the fresh as possible. I've been, and just to go back, you said earlier that not everybody has access to maybe fresh food or farm food. And I said this on another podcast episode that if you don't have access to fresh, organic, local food, that you need to speak up. You need to go to your grocery store and tell the manager that this is unacceptable, that all that pesticide, herbicide, glyphosate bullshit, GMO, has no place in a grocery store, just like all the packaged boxes out, get it out. Stop being a petit, comment tu dis, un petit pantin, like a
Oui.
little puppet, that's obeying like the big industries that are keeping us sick and fat and unhealthy. Like it's like, and people will have to demand better food, quite frankly.
Well, so here in Calgary, there's a gal who's just started some research into butter, and the article came out about a week and a half ago that they've changed how they're caring for cows and they're feeding them palm oil supplements. And that palm oil supplement, as part of their feed, has now changed the consistency of butter. And now you can't bake with butter as you typically would have even 2 years ago. So she's done all of this research, Julie Van Rosendahl, she's amazing. Well, one of the best response was one gal saying, look at this. As soon as we piped up a week ago, the dairy farmers of Canada, AgroPure au Québec, all of these different dairy organizations in the States, in Canada, in the UK, in lots of different lands, all said, oops, okay, sorry, we're going to stop doing the palm oil supplementation. If you raise a stink, I suppose that puts it in a negative light. I don't mean it in a negative light.
Yeah.
If you ask, she asked questions. She wasn't mean. She wasn't bullying. She was just saying, hey, how come this? Oh, I did research. I talked to this person. Look, here's all this research. Well, all of that was done so that the farmers and the dairy producers could make more money with a smaller herd to produce fatter milk and more milk. Well, now you're playing with the system and you're playing God, for God's sake. Like
And
no,
palm oil.
yeah.
Like,
Oh, right. Which has a whole host of
yeah,
other.
no, like palm oil. What?
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense. So first of all, people have to stop buying that crap. And if they stop buying it and buy from, grass-fed butter, which I was finally able to find around here, like a high quality butter. I'm doing dairy free pretty much everything except butter.
Yeah. butter is one of the most nourishing foods out there,
Yeah,
for
no,
sure.
I love my butter, but it's a really good butter as well. And again, like I really hear that, and I want people to hear that, that if you want to be healthy, you're going to have to take this into your own hands for yourself and for your kids. And also because it's time now, again, 2021, it is absolutely time for things to change. It is unacceptable that we get crappy food in our grocery store. It is unacceptable that the environment is still trashed and destroyed. Like, it's unacceptable that not everybody has pure, clean water. It's unacceptable that not everybody is eating. That's unacceptable. It has to stop. It's unacceptable that the guy at the park this weekend was beating his dog and I have to call the SPCA. Like all at the end. And you know, during the event, I was with my partner and my two dogs, and we stopped. And I told the guy, I said, "You're hitting your dog. Stop hitting your dog." And three people, not even 5 meters away from me, two men, one woman, two big dogs had stopped to listen to our conversation. They were doing nothing. And the man looked very aggressive and violent and was bigger than both myself and Andrew. And a guy that was standing there turned around and said, "Mind your own fucking business." And so because we felt afraid for our lives, we left.
Mhm.
And then I raised shit on Facebook and we found the guy, because
Wow.
Facebook is good for one thing. Facebook is good to get the word out on things. So all that to say that that was a little bit of a side note, but we have to speak up. We can't
Yeah.
just, you know, so many times I hear, and it just infuriates me. People will just shrug their shoulders and say, well, that's how it is. Can't do anything about it. No, you can. You
You can.
can do something about it, but you have to take one small action. Maybe ask for help if you don't feel that you don't have the power. And if you're too tired and you're too fragile as a white woman, go take a nap
Yeah.
and fucking get some fire out of your ass and then raise some hell in your community, and then things are going to change. Because don't wait for your leaders to do these changes.
No, because it's all driven by money. So if you want to drive by money, let them at it. But if you want to make good decisions, I think we're seeing such an impact, especially if you look at the kids and our teens right now. There's so much stuff going on with the teens health wise and body wise, and how some stuff is, I think they're evolving with the amount of crap our bodies are having to deal with in our environment and as humans. So
Yeah.
we find ourselves in that time of abundance. But yeah, there's an abundance of crap. There's an abundance of weird stuff happening, but there's also an abundance of opportunity if you look for it. There's an abundance of possibility as well. And there's an abundance of food, time, and energy if you need it. There's also an abundance of time for you to nap. We are the first generation that can nap. Go have a nap.
That's
Do what
crazy.
you need to, and stand up for what you believe in, for sure, because I think we need it at this time. And in that, it's been 10 days since the article on butter came out. Already all of the dairy farmers have all said, we're all going to look into this and stop using the supplementation. In 10 days, one
That's amazing.
article had the potential of changing a worldwide way of feeding cattle that has been 2 years in the making. One article, 10
There you
days,
go.
life of change. So
There you-
stand up. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. And
yeah.
if confronting somebody feels too hard, just ask questions. Just start with questions.
Read labels, you know, first, like read labels. Do you know the Food Babe?
I do. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, so she's definitely created a Food Babe army, but not everybody has to dedicate their career to do that.
Yeah.
So anybody listening can go follow her, and because just supporting these kinds of warriors is very helpful. But as an empowered person in your household, even if you're still single, you don't have a family, but you want to be empowered in your health, read labels. You know, if you see things you can't pronounce, take out your phone, go on ewg.org or whatever, do like a Google search. Maybe Google Scholar is a little better, or DuckDuckGo.
Please go to
And
DuckDuckGo because it's way better. Google is actually
yeah,
choosing what kind of results you get.
I know.
DuckDuck is the more honest answer that you'll get. Yeah.
I know. I've ranted about this many, many, many times, and I still question why the heck I'm on Google. I just want to wrap up by just pointing something back that you said that I feel we could dive deeper into another conversation. But you talked about homeopathic medicine, and it reminded me of flower essences, something we talk a lot about in our herbalism course. And I just want to wrap up our conversation by touching a little bit on this, because you said something about homeopathy and again, flower medicine, flower essence medicine, which can open an energetic doorway
Mhm.
that energy medicine can do that as well. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about everyone that says that they've tried everything and nothing has worked. Again, that's not the case. It's not possible that you've tried everything, but you might want to try an energetic component.
Mhm. Mhm.
I really felt that when you talked about the door opening so that the trash could be taken out. And I've worked with flower medicine for so long now, flower essences, and they work on the energetic body. And I've had such incredible experiences, and they're so subtle and beautiful and supportive. And they're flowers.
No,
They're
but the
amazing.
medicine flowers, especially, so this is the thing, we're feeling the stress keenly. I think, right, leaky gut is the cells in the intestinal lining coming apart. That is how we are experiencing the world right now. I don't think it's by accident that we're feeling the world keenly. Only when we feel it keenly will we feel the fire under our tush to stand up and go, enough is enough, stop it. And
Yeah.
the energetic piece, you get to that energetic level when there is that much leakiness happening between the gut and the blood-brain barrier and the outside world and your own existence. So I think we are in a time where that's where we're evolving to, and it's part of our toolkit. It can very easily be a part of our toolkit for sure.
Yes. So I'm going to link everything in the show notes, but I'm going to say it right here. Your website is Histamine Haven, but it's .com. And then you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, you're on YouTube, you're entertaining, you're fun. I can't wait for your book to come out. Anything I can do to help with that. I actually have some publishers to suggest because I got sent a bunch of books and I have a feeling some of those publishers would totally be open. So I'm going to send you that in an email. I'm excited about your book because I feel you're going to bring something that wasn't covered in other histamine books that I have. They don't go deep enough.
Mhm.
And the more people start to learn about this, they're going to need to have really specific answers, which I think you're the expert that you can provide that. So I'm really excited. When you have your book, you can come back on and we can celebrate, have a party.
I'm in. I'm in.
So thank you so much. You're just amazing. And I heard so many things from what you said. I'm really hearing. And then just side note, like you wrote to me last week when I was trying to book this date for the interview. And you said, Mondays I can't, I cook. And I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. So what is it? You have a dedicated day to cook. You're cooking for other people, you said?
Yeah, I do make some food for other people, just friends and a few people in and around. And I do a lot of fermenting actually for people. So I'll do it. That's just a side little gig where that has to be a day every 2 weeks because
I love it.
yeah. And that's another piece of bringing people together. Like food does that, right? It brings people together. And I need that. Like it feeds me on such a deep level for sure. I
Wow.
come from a long line of women who were makers, and I will continue to be a maker and creator for the rest of my life.
I
So,
love that.
okay, I'll do it. Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being an incredible guest on the Journey to Glow podcast. Thank you.
Merci, Caroline. It is I that is thanking you for a chance to talk about it. Histamine can be such a convoluted and really complicated piece, but it doesn't have to be. And you don't have to figure it out yourself. That's part of it. There's not as you were saying, there's not a concise resource out there. There's a few really great pieces, but they don't cover everything. And our goal is to really give a guide and cookbook just to help make it make sense so that if you're doing it on your own, you will have enough tools to get some of the pieces and where to go if you want to dive deeper is the concept. So we're looking forward to it. And for sure, you're going to be on our list when it's all ready to go.
Thank you, mademoiselle.
Mon plaisir.